Well, good morning and welcome back to another live iThemes training event. My name is Nathan Ingram. I'm the host here at iThemes Training, and I am joined today by Michael Moore. Michael's been on the iThemes security support team for more than 3 years now, and in that time, he's answered well over 10,000 support tickets, all about WordPress security-related issues. So Michael's a guy that definitely understands how to help WordPress users secure their websites, and today he's going to be talking to us about 10 things that you need to do right now to secure your website. So, Michael, welcome back to iThemes Training. How's it going today?
It is going great. How about yourself?
I am doing well. So, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be covering today in this webinar.
We are going to be covering 10 simple things you can do right now to secure your WordPress site. You don't have to be a security expert. And from no matter what your skill level is, we're going to give you actionable steps you can take to secure your site.
Excellent. So whether you are a WordPress expert securing sites for clients, or whether you simply have your own do-it-yourself website that you built on WordPress, there'll be some things you can take away from this webinar that will be very helpful, again, like Michael said, regardless of your skill level. So a couple of housekeeping details as we get started. Again, the chat room is live over at ithemes.com/chat. We encourage you to head over there. There's a lot of folks in GoToWebinar who are not over in the chat room, so head over there. That's the best place to get your questions answered throughout the webinar today. We do encourage live participation in the webinar. As you have a question that comes to mind, drop it there in the chat room, and my job is to store those questions and bring those back to Michael as we wrap up for a good time of questions and answers. That's one of the best things about having a guy like Michael here on these webinars. He knows all about WordPress security. That's what he does day in and day out, and we are thrilled to answer your specific questions about your specific concerns throughout this webinar today. So again, ithemes.com/chat is that location. If you ask a question, please preface it with the word question, and I'll uppercase. That just helps me to pick out the questions as the chat room goes by. And also, if you ask a question, please watch the chat room for another minute or two after you ask, in case I have a follow-up question, just so I can have a good, clear question for Michael when we come over to the time of questions and answers. I'm about to drop the slide link in the chat room again for today. If you haven't downloaded today's slides and you want to follow along, you can do that. And also the replay of today's webinar, if you want to go back and watch and review later, or if you want to share it out to others, the replay link is there in the chat room now as well. You can watch it. We'll be up about an hour or so after the webinar completes today. So I believe that hits all the details. Michael, let's talk about what we can do to secure our website.
All right. Oh, why is mine? Okay. There we go. There. Now it's moving. All right. The great thing about WordPress security is that most hacks can be prevented with simple security measures. If you are willing to take a proactive approach to secure your site, the chances of your site getting exploited are going to be very low. Now, the first thing you want to do is to update all of the things. This means updating, making sure that the software on your server is up to date, the software on your site is up to date, and WordPress itself is up to date. You want every single site running the latest version, and here's why. I think we all remember the huge Equifax breach. I bring this up all the time because this hack was completely preventable. All they had to do was update Apache to the latest version that had the patch for the exploit that was used on them. They had plenty of warning letting them know, hey, danger, danger, danger. Apache has a vulnerability, but guess what? We are shipping out the patch with the announcement of the vulnerability. You'll be safe. They chose to ignore that, and it cost them millions of dollars, and it also cost them a mistrust from not only us as citizens, but from our congressman there in Washington, D.C. And if you guys have had your ear to the ground at all about the WordPress news lately, you have heard that there's been a ton of vulnerabilities that are in WordPress plugins that are super popular, that have been installed on thousands of sites. The social warfare plugin, Uzo, and WP-SMTP all had vulnerabilities lately. But lucky for us, when those vulnerabilities were discovered very quickly and patched very quickly. But if you're not updating your sites, you're not going to get those patched, and your sites will remain vulnerable. Now, a couple things you can do to make this a little bit easier on you. You can enable automatic updates, and you can use the WordPress codec instructions for the do-it-yourselfers, but iTheme Security Pro version management features for the squeamish. You can do auto updates, WordPress core, auto updates of plugins, themes. You scan your scan for old websites. And the reason why you'd want to scan for old websites, let's say that you are a site manager and you do a bunch of testing to ensure compatibility, but then you forget about one of the sites that you spin up, and it just lays dormant. And I know I do a lot of testing, and before the dev server got hacked, I actually had the scan for old websites save my bacon. It alerted me that I was running a site on the same server that was running a quite a bit out of date version of WordPress. And the reason why I was so out of date is I installed an older version to do some testing to ensure compatibility. But had I left it on there, there's plenty of known vulnerabilities for older versions of WordPress. I was leaving not only my sites, but the whole dev server at risk of being exploited. So thankfully, I did have iTheme Security installed in this test site because it did save my bacon and maybe even my job. Now, real quick, I just want to show you guys the iTheme Security version management feature. It's part of iTheme Security Pro, and you can go over here and you can click the configure settings. And I would definitely recommend automatically installing the latest versions of WordPress. But the great thing about the version management feature is you can set a custom list. You can either have it set to automatically update everything as soon as an update becomes available. But let's say that you have a plugin that you really like, but unfortunately, some of the updates have caused you problems in the past. You can choose to delay a specific update for a predetermined amount of time. That way, it will give you an opportunity to test to make sure there's not going to be any conflicts on any of your sites before updating. And you still have the sense of security, knowing that you're getting the latest security patches applied to your site while not running in a risk of breaking your site. So yeah, I really like the version management feature. Another great thing about it is you can strengthen your site when you're running outdated software. This will force users to use two-factor authentication and just add an extra layer of security to your site. Whoops. All right. So again, it's going to automatically update WordPress plugins, plugins and themes. It's going to strengthen your site when running outdated software, and it is going to scan for old WordPress sites. Now, also keep in mind that you do want to scan, or you want to make sure that your PHP versions and Apache and everything in your server's up to date. I had a ticket come in just last week where I had someone inquire about a compatibility checker error, or not really an error, it was just left picking up on something that was left in for legacy support. But they were telling me they were updating from, their host was finally updating them from PHP version 5.2 to 5.6. And I said, first of all, let's focus on the fact that your host is updating you to use that term loosely, because 5.6 is no longer being supported. And unfortunately, it seems like the majority of WordPress sites are still running on PHP 5.6 that has reached end of life. And what that means, it is no longer being supported and will not receive any more security patches. So it is important to hold your host accountable to make sure that you are running the latest versions of the software to ensure that you're getting the security patches. Okay, another great one to think about is remove software from untrusted sources. Only install WordPress plugins and themes from trusted sources. So let's say, I know for a fact that we've had our plugin used before where someone took it, modified the code, made their own repo for it, sold it for money, and so literally sold a hacked version of the plugin to put on their site. So they thought they were getting a great deal. And unfortunately, they actually paid to put an exploit on their site. Now, that is why you will always want to check to make sure the person who is selling the plugin actually has some kind of deal in place with the developer of the plugin. Because unfortunately, there's a ton of people out there that are willing to take advantage of people. And so the more that you can just mitigate the opportunity of exploits by only downloading and installing software from trusted sources. Now, you will often hear about how Apple is so much more secure than Android. And there's simply only one reason why Apple is more secure than Android, and it's because Android allows you to install software from third-party locations. So you just say yes, and then so you have these people who go and download free versions of paid apps, and they are installing malware onto their phone. Apple takes a little bit more of a secure approach. Like, no, you can install the software from the store because this is going to be a trusted source, a trusted app repository. So it's just something to keep in mind. You don't want to end up paying money or installing vulnerabilities on your site. Now, another thing, again, we want to limit PHP exploit opportunities. Exploiting PHP is a common method used by hackers to gain access to your WordPress site. That, or even using the like exploiting the AJAX code of the site to do a SQL injection to just kind of take over. So what you want to do is, if you have any plugins or themes on your site that you aren't using, just go ahead and remove them. There's no reason to keep them on your site, because the more code you have installed on your site, the more possible points of entry you're giving to a would-be hacker. Now, if you see that you have not received an update in 6 months or longer, you may want to make sure that the app has not been abandoned. Now, even if a plugin does not have any recent updates, it doesn't necessarily mean it has been abandoned. It could just mean that the plugin is feature complete and will only receive updates to ensure the latest version of WordPress, or just make sure it's compatible with the latest versions of WordPress and PHP. We have some plugins that are feature complete, and the only time they ever get updates is to make sure that we had some of our display plugins that needed to be modified a little bit with like PHP 7. So when PHP 7 came out, we had to push out updates to all those to make sure they're compatible. So some of those might go a long time without being updated, but it's good to check to make sure that they haven't been abandoned. Because if no one is paying attention to it and there ends up being a known exploit for it, there is going to be someone finds the exploit, it's going to be a while before it becomes known. Now, the next thing you want to do is you're going to want to create a password strategy. Now, the first thing is don't reuse passwords. It is very important to use a unique password for every single site. Now, using the iThemes Security Pro password requirement feature, you can force strong passwords. You can force password changes. So let's say that you install iThemes Security Pro and you want to make sure everyone is currently using a strong password. You can click let's go over there and take a look at that real quick. If I can scroll up, you can go ahead and click the force password change button. And what this will do is, on the next time anyone logs in, it's going to require them to enter in a password that meets your new password, your strong password requirements. And you also want to refuse compromised passwords. Troy Hunt of the Have I Been Pwned API fame, he created an IPA where he adds a bunch of databases that of known, excuse me, let me try to rephrase that. So what he has done, he has compiled a list of database dumps that included username and passwords. So what it does, we send a hashed version of your credentials to the API so it can compare it to its list of known compromised passwords. And if that password has been a part of a database exploit, a database dump, it's going to refuse that user from using that password. And this is great for great in two ways. The first way is going to keep your site secure by refusing and not allowing anyone to use a password that is known to be compromised. And then two, it's great for the person entering the password because if they're using a password that's been compromised somewhere, it's likely that they're using it everywhere. And this will alert them to the fact that they probably need to go and update their password everywhere. So it is, I'm really glad that he has taken it upon himself to do that. Yeah, I think that's great. Now, another thing you want to do, you want to use a password manager. I personally use LastPass. And the reason why you want to do this, because it makes it super, super easy to generate a random secure password. You can easily keep track of all your unique and strong passwords. You can easily change passwords. It will, when you change it, it's going to give you a little pop-up. You want to update your password for this account, and you'll just say, yes, thank you. It's safe and convenient, has a safe and convenient autofill feature when you're using the browser extension. Really can't go wrong. So again, WordPress password strategy. You want to require all your users to use a strong password. You want those passwords to be unique. You want to refuse compromised passwords. You also may want to set a password expiration date. I don't want anyone, for example, you can say, I don't want anyone on my site using a password that is over 120 days old. And you want to make sure you are using a password manager. Okay, so, and here's why you want to require people to use a strong password. So if you take a look at this, you can see that using a 4-core i5 processor, a user that has a 7-character password will only take 0.29 milliseconds to crack. And just look up Password Cracker online. It's super, super easy to find a brute force tool that's automatically built that's going to be able to crack these easy passwords really quickly. So now if you just go up to 8 characters, it goes from 0.29 milliseconds to 5 hours to crack. Add another character, you're up to 4 months. Go all the way up to 12 characters, and it's going to take 2 centuries to crack using a i5 4-core processor. Now, you want to avoid using sequential strings of letters. It makes the password much more predictable compared to a random password. Now, a random password which has random characters. So using randomization increases the predictability and increases the strength of the password. And now keep in mind, you want to have a variation of your characters. Using only lowercase letters limits the pool of possible characters to 26. It is very vital to include alphanumeric, uppercase letters, and common ASCII letters like exclamation points, just special characters, to increase the pool of characters needed to crack the password 292. So if you have just lowercase passwords or lowercase letters, you have a possible pool of characters of 26. Using uppercase and ASCII characters, you are all the way up to 92 characters that they'll need to use in order to crack the password. Now, you really can't control whether or not people are really using password on your site, but you can protect WordPress from being compromised using compromised passwords with the iTunes Security Pro Have I Pwned API. Now, a list compiled by Splash Data, the most common passwords included in all of the data dumps was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, people are still using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And even though you might be using a password manager, using a unique password on every single site, unfortunately, it's hard to make. You can't force all your users, anyone editing the site, to not reuse passwords. You can only hope that they don't and set up the requirements of having strong passwords and refusing compromised passwords. So again, this is one of the best first steps you can take into securing your site. Again, force password chains, force strong passwords, and password expiration. Refuse compromised passwords, including a link in the slides to the haveibeenpwned.com, which again, Troy Hunt, what he has done is really, really great. And again, use a password manager. It is super, super easy and super, super beneficial. I even have the LastPass Mac app. So literally I set up a hotkey. So anytime I need to do a password, I just enter my hotkey, it pops up a little pop-up. I type in the first little bit of the account, hit copy of the password, paste in, and then I am already off and moving. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is using two-factor authentication. Now, again, it starts with a password, but according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, over 70% of employees reuse passwords at work. But the most important stat from the report is that 81% of hacking-related breaches leverage either stolen or weak passwords. So think about that. 81% of successful hacks were leveraged by using stolen or weak passwords. Now, even though 91% of people know that reusing passwords is poor practice, 59% of people still reuse the same password everywhere. We're hardwired to take the path of least resistance. It's easy to remember what we consider a strong password, and then once we have one strong password, we think we can use it everywhere. But unfortunately, like we talked about previously, is that if, for example, a lot of people will use their email address as their account name everywhere, and then they'll use the same password for every single account. That password and email address is involved in one database dump. All of a sudden, it gets posted on Mega, where Troy Hunt he found a database dump that was hosted on Mega, which is a file sharing tool that had over 1 billion unique combinations of email addresses and credentials, over 1 billion. And so once that is made public, and an admin user, one of your admin users was part of that database dump, now everyone is going to have admin credentials to your site. So what you need to do is add two-factor authentication, because you're going to add another layer to help what you're doing when you add two-factor authentication and force your privileged users to use it. You're helping them not become a security vulnerability. No one wants to become a security vulnerability, but it's up to you to set the standards of security in your site. Because again, we are hardwired to take the path of least resistance. So you want to take the opportunities out of their hands of adding a security hole into your site. So any method of two-factor is better than none, but some are better than others. Examples of two-factor are going to be SMS, email, single-use codes, a mobile app, YubiKey, which is one of the USB security keys. And if have an Android device of like Android 7.0 or higher, they just made it so you can turn your phone into a security key and connect it to your computer via Bluetooth. And but right now it's just available for Google apps, but it's pretty cool and something worth checking out. I am always a fan of anything that makes using two-factor a little bit easier for everyone. Now, the next thing you want to do is you're going to want to run malware scans on your site. We use Security in the iThemes Security Pro, but there's also Google Safe Browsing, Web Inspector. And if you have iThemes Security Pro and you enable the scheduled malware scan, your site will automatically be scanned twice daily, and you'll be alerted of any failure. Now, you want to make sure that you are actually logging the malware scans. You want to be recording every single result of your malware scan, and here's why. If you are only recording found malware and not failed scans, you could be thinking your site is being scanned the whole time when it's literally been months since you have a malware scan. And if for example, like we'll get people bringing in tickets with security running into 500 errors on the server. And what you're going to want to do is reach out to the host. Hey, why is security not able to scan my site? I need to know if I have any known vulnerabilities. I need them to be able to check it. And had they not seen the failed malware scan in their logs, they would have never known that there was an issue. So again, it's important to be alerted as quickly as possible of any breach. The longer you know, the longer it takes for you to know about a hack, the more damage it can possibly do. So it can, like the average time for someone to find out that a breach has happened is, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like days afterwards, where your site has been hacked. You're not going in and manually inspecting the whole server, every single application, seeing if any users have been added or modified. So you want to have systems put in place to automate that for you, because the faster you can figure out that your site has been hacked, the easier the cleanup will be, the easier you can start repairing customer trust, letting them know what happened. But I remember when OnePlus not too long ago, it took them a long time to figure out that there was actually malware on the server that was key scraping, which means they were, anytime anyone was putting in credit card information, they were using JavaScript to record the keys. So they would see that this is their credit card number, this is their username, this is password. And so they were able to steal a bunch of people information who were just going on the site to try to buy a phone. So since it took them so long to find the malware, way more of their customers had lost their ability to, or had their credit card information compromised. Which, yeah, I get that the insurance, or the banks and the credit card companies usually have insurance to cover the hack, but that's a bunch of time for your customers, a bunch of time for you. So again, make sure you have systems put in place so you can be notified immediately when a hack occurs. And this is moving right into the record file changes. This is goes right along with the malware scan, because you want to make sure you're recording file changes, because it can alert you to a compromise. Catching malicious changes when they happen can limit the amount of damage that is done to your site. Now, the reason why you want to record file changes is if there's any unexpected changes, like you didn't, it wasn't an update, wasn't a backup, it wasn't cache, and so unexpected changes, you need to go in and compare the file to one of a recent backup to see if any malicious changes have been made. Because not all malware are going to have, like, even though security does its best, they can't guarantee 100% effectiveness on picking up malware, but neither can anyone else. That's just not a reasonable expectation. But you can also record file changes, because if that malware doesn't have signature, but all of a sudden you're seeing a bunch of changes on your site that you don't expect, you can go in there and investigate, and then again get alerted as soon as possible, so you can take action and mitigating the damage, mitigating the lost trust that you have with your customers, and just really making sure you're staying on top of the changes happening in your site. And if you enable the file change scan and iTeam security, you'll be notified of any file change. So you can go in there, review it real quick, and then move on with your day. All right, and so there's several legitimate reasons why you would see new file activity in your logs, but again there is WordPress updates, plugin updates, theme updates. If iTeam security writes a banned user to the HT access, you can see that the HT access has been updated to add that rule. So that's actually not a bad thing. It's actually iTeam security securing your site. And again, the best way to compare a file to the previous version is to make sure you're doing updates, or make sure you're doing backups and using your text editor to compare the different files. Because you can do a Google search of whatever your preferred text editor is and get step instructions to see what was modified. Because they make it really, really easy, because they have like a either like a compare feature, or it's called a diff feature, and then you can easily check. Now, if you enable the online file comparison and iTheme security, what will happen is there are different hashes that are given to the different plugins and themes in the WordPress.org repository. So when a plugin gets updated from either the .org repository or the iThemes repository, iThemes will compare the file hashes and know that, okay, this is a legitimate update, and it won't notify you that the file has been changed, causing any unnecessary concern. Now, it doesn't currently do this for themes on the .org repo. It does do it in the iThemes repo, because there isn't currently any hashes or checksums available for the themes, but that is a planned feature. I'm not sure exactly when that's coming out, but hopefully it's sooner than later. I'm also including the links if you want to do it yourself. There is different WP CLI commands, which is just terminal commands for WordPress, that you can use that will automatically run these checks for you. And you can do that on your own without the need of a plugin. All right, the next thing you want to do is monitor user activity. If a user becomes compromised, you'll want to know exactly what damage that they've done to your site. So if you take a look right here, the type of user activity you'll want to record is logging in and logging out, adding and removing plugins, user creation, changes to posts or pages. So the reason why let's go to number one. The reason why you want to monitor logging in or logging out. Let's say that you notice for some reason your user logged in at a time that you didn't expect, and from a location you didn't expect, and then that is going to be a clue for you that maybe your user was compromised, and so you're going to want to follow the trail of activity of what is done. So did that user log in at an unusual time or from a new place? Okay, yes, you're going to want to start with your investigation. The next thing you want to put these out of order. Sorry about that. I just realized that. The next thing you want to keep track of is did they create any new users? Sometimes what a hacker would do is they'll create a new user to try to cover up their tracks. So they'll create a new admin user, get out of your user. That way you don't notice any wonky activity on your user. And they'll go in, they'll add militia plugin, or they'll add code to the htaccess to do redirects to their spam sites. So what you can do is go into the logs and then see if that user was created. If it was, then you can go directly to that user and then see exactly a timeline of the steps they did. Did they add or remove any plugins? Did they change any posts? To add any spam advertisement directly on your site? So again, it's very important that you make sure you monitor user activity, because this is a great way to see if they injected any malicious code. And again, these are all things you can do to lock down your site. And if your site does get compromised, you want to find out about it as quickly as possible so you can take down any embarrassing pages. I was talking with Corey, one of the founders of iThemes. He used to work for a church, and one of his friends' church's sites actually end up having a bunch of Viagra ads on the church site, which is kind of embarrassing. You're a church site. Like, that's the last thing that you want people to think about when they're going and looking through your website. So again, it is if something does change, you want to go into the site and get that corrected as soon as you possibly can. Now, another thing, you want to limit login attempts. By default, WordPress doesn't limit any failed login attempts. Without this limit, WordPress can be an easy target for brute force attacks. Again, there is brute force attacks is just a trial and error method used to discover username and password or in order to hack into a website. So since WordPress doesn't track any user login activity, there's no built-in way to protect your site from a brute force attack. If you see that a single username or IP has multiple consecutive failed login attempts, the chances are you're under a brute force attack. Now, identifying when you're under a brute force attack is a great start, but there is still more work to be done. You can increase your WordPress login security by limiting the number of failed login attempts of a single user or IP that is allowed. So, for example, if you're using iTheme Security Pro and you're in the brute force protection, by default, there's a IP has 5 failed login attempts before they're locked out. And then once that that user has been locked out 3 times, they'll be banned from, or once an IP has been locked out 3 times, it'll be banned from even accessing your site. So again, it's just about automating the protection of your site. Brute force attacks are super popular. Your WordPress login is going to be the most attacked part of your WordPress site. And the reason why it's the most attacked part of your WordPress site, it is the easiest point of entry to find. WordPress, by design, makes it easy to use. The login page is it's the front door to your site. And just like with any store, you know exactly where the front door is. And so by limiting the login attempts, you're adding a big lock to it, because otherwise it's that same person is able to keep busting down your door. And creating a script to scan the internet looking for WordPress logins and just randomly try common username and passwords is very, very easy. And since the barrier entry is so low, there's a ton of these bots just scouring the internet, just trying. And not to mention, you can find literally thousands of different tools that that are already pre-built that you can use to target to do brute force attacks. There's one specifically for WordPress. There's one specifically for Facebook, just looking to break into these accounts. They make it super, super easy for even the novice. And there's people who do just try to do stuff for fun. I was listening to an episode of Reply All, and there are people who do simple brute force attacks to try to get what they call Instagram or Twitter or Facebook OG usernames. It's usually something simple without any special characters in it. Like the girl they were talking to, her username was Lizard, and literally someone took over her account doing a brute force attack. She didn't have any two-factor enabled, and sent her threatening messages saying, you better stay off this account because it is a huge industry of selling these OG usernames for thousands of dollars. I was unaware of this until I listened to the Reply All podcast. I didn't realize that was a thing. That's just another reason for people to go around just randomly trying brute force attacks on different accounts. Now, the step 10, the 10th thing you're going to want to do right now to help secure your site is make backups. And the reason why you want to make a backup is if you can catch a hack early enough, you follow all these other steps, you're helping prevent these attacks from being successful. But if they do, you're using the tools at your disposal to identify it as quickly as possible. And then you can restore your site back to a state prior to the hack, and hopefully before any real damage has been done. And you can use your security locks to find the point of entry, whether it was a successful brute force attack. And if that's all it was, and you can identify that in the logs, you just roll back your site, change the password, make sure you have 2FA enabled, and you're good. Now, keep in mind, it's important to store your backups off-site. because if your server and site have become compromised, guess what? Now all of a sudden, your backups of your website are also compromised. So using Backup Buddy Stash Live, not only are you getting, not only is it going to keep track of real-time changes in your site and automatically back those up, it's going to encrypt them off automatically in Stash. They're going to be encrypted off-site storage, and they're going to be really, really, really easy to restore. And also, before the backups get placed in Stash, they're going to be scanned again for malware. And if the backup is compromised, it's going to alert you saying, hey, so you know this backup's compromised. Like you might want to restore from the previous version that wasn't flagged for malware. Now, it's, I added a couple useful links before we get to the question. I added a couple useful links. The iThemes YouTube channel. It is a great resource. We keep adding more videos to it. I just added a how to customize the iThemes security notification recipients tutorial. I'm really going to be trying to add more tutorials that are for your average iThemes security user, not any developer-focused tutorials. Just simple, practical things you can do and to either secure your site, but also we cover all things WordPress on that channel. I'm including a link to the iThemes security help center. So if you have any questions about anything iThemes security related, that is a great place to start. I'm also including the iThemes security blog. I'm going to have an article coming out this week about the importance of two-factor authentication. There's a lot of really great information in there, and there's also going to be an accompanying video that I recorded for that. And then tomorrow we're doing a YouTube live Q&A. And we're actually going to give away a 1-year subscription to iThemes Security Pro. And the link to sign up for it is right here. And then to register for the free subscription. And then the event URL is going to be right here. And then finally, just so you guys know, we are running a security sale all for the rest of the month. Save 35% off right now on iThemes Security Pro plugin suite or the toolkit plans till the end of the month. I'm ready to answer some questions. I know that was a lot of information, so if you guys need me to break anything down, please let me know.
Absolutely. So we got some great questions stacked up here, and if you have not yet asked your question, please do so over in the chat room there at ithemes.com/chat. ithemes.com/chat. And yeah, just a reminder, pardon me, 35% off of all iThemes Security Pro packages using the code ITSEC35 through the end of the month. So if you don't have a license for iThemes products, this is a great way to get away from the free version and into the pro version. There's a lot more features, some of which Michael showed us today. So, all right. Questions stacking up here. Crystal asked, earlier you mentioned about downloading plugins from reputable sources. If a plugin is not downloadable from WordPress.org, can you talk about what other kinds of sources that we should trust?
Yeah. For example, with iThemes Security, the free version you can get on the .org repo, but the pro version you're going to get directly from our website. And then most of the other pro developer or people who make the premium plugins are going to have that in their site. But there's also, I know that sometimes like hosting companies will make deals to resell either themes or plugins. And so you can, if it's coming from like a premium plugin is coming from like GoDaddy, that's going to be a trusted source. So if you do see a plugin by a developer on a site, you might want to make sure and check with the developer to make sure that this person actually has permission and they know that they're selling the plugin. Because again, they can modify the code in whatever way they want and then sell it. It's going to have like all the same brand. They steal the branding. They steal the basic UI and layout of the plugin. They just add their own code in it to inject in your site. So always, if you're not buying directly from the developer, always double check with the developer to make sure they have an agreement with the company who's doing the resell of it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always best just to buy directly from the developer. Some of the other cases where that's may not be available is like on Code Canyon, for example, and other
Hmm.
marketplaces like that. There's some others that are reputable sources. And really, if you just Google a little bit, you'll be able to see, oh, here's the developer's website, and oh, this is where you buy it from them directly. It's generally pretty simple to figure that information out. Just stay within those reputable sources, and you'll be in a lot better shape. Let's see. Marie would like to know which password manager that you personally recommend, Michael.
I love LastPass.
Yeah, and we talked a little.
Um,
Go ahead.
well, yeah, I just like because, like I said, I have I have the browser extension right here, so that's gonna a lot of times will autofill up passwords for me. But even if it's an app or something else that I use on my desktop that's not compatible, it's not online. I'm not going to access it through a browser. I have my LastPass app right here that I can just type in anything, and then I'll pull up all these different accounts for me. And I can just either copy the password, copy the username, and then post it right in there. Um, it is super convenient and um, yeah, super easy, and it's free. I can generate secure passwords right here. Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Good deal. And there are several other really good password managers as well. Any password manager, as I mentioned in the chat earlier, is better than using 1 2 3 4 5 6 on
Yes.
a website. So good unique password managed by a password manager. We mentioned the big three in the chat earlier. 1Password is a good one if you're on the Mac, and there's also
Yes.
Dashlane, LastPass. There's bunches of them out there. So do a little research. You'll find the one that's good for you. And that's the one. LastPass is what Michael recommends. I like 1Password for Mac myself. So find one that fits your workflow better.
And I
Let's
heard
see.
one pass. One password is better if you have like an Apple phone. Right now, I have an Android phone, and LastPass works pretty good on there. But I heard one password works really, really well on iOS devices.
Yeah, and 1Password is a Mac app, so that's one caveat. All right, here's another question. Where is the malware scan schedule set up, or does it automatically run every day if you don't have an issue and you don't get an alert? So talk about the schedule and then also the notifications for the malware scan.
Okay, so you can once this is enabled, it's going to automatically scan your site twice daily. You can use in that useful link. You can go to the Help Center and see how to enable IT ITSEC debug, uh, which then you can go and go to your debug screen. And you can see exactly when your cron events are scheduled to run. I think my next malware scan is set to run in 10 hours from now. Um, and because all this stuff is managed by different cron events, which just means when your site gets a little bit of traffic, it's going to trigger these cron events in about the scheduled time and to automatically run them. So really, you don't need to worry about it. Just know that you can, um, once it is enabled, that your um, site is getting scanned twice daily. And you can always go and check your security dashboard to make sure that the malware scans are running as expected.
Excellent. Okay, and I'm actually wrong. Julian is saying that 1Password works on Windows, so that's a new bit of information for me. Thanks, Julian, for clearing that up. All right, so Crystal, if you have additional questions about that malware scan schedule, just ask it there in the chat. And again, if you have a question that you've not asked yet, please do so at ithemes.com/chat. Drop it in there and we'll get it over to Michael. So here's a question from Ben. Any tips on restoring a site after a hack when you don't want to lose, for example, the latest orders in WooCommerce by maybe restoring a backup from a day ago or that sort of thing? How do you clean up when you
Um,
have live data like that?
when it gets to be complicated like that, you're going to want to reach out to a hack repair specialist because they're going to be able to save as much as the data as they can as they're repairing the site. So my recommendation would be to temporarily take the site down to prevent any more users' information from becoming compromised, and then reaching out to a hack repair specialist immediately. Because the thing about this stuff is, even though I have been working on the security plugin for 3 years, I have read and practiced and looked into a very high level of web security, the level of knowledge that it takes to actually clean a site and to make sure that you're only removing the malware. That way you can save the data that you need, like you were talking about your WooCommerce orders. The level of knowledge and expertise you have is way above what I can do and what most people can do. And if you are asking the question, like the truth of the matter is, you need to get a professional to do that for you. It's like $200 to get usually like between 150 to $200 to get your site clean, but you're paying for the expertise and the peace of mind to limit the amount of work that you have to try to do yourself, and to make sure that your information, the data you want, is saved while you are getting your site clean and ensuring that the vulnerability has been patched in your site. It is probably the best 150 to $200 that you can ever spend. If hopefully you can do enough to mitigate any of the attacks to prevent them from being successful. But as we know, sometimes these things are out of control, and no matter, even if you follow every single WordPress security best practices, server best security practices, unfortunately, nothing can be 100% effective.
All right, good answer. Melanie would like to know, what is the difference between a brute force attack and a DDoS attack?
A brute force attack is going to be a little less sophisticated attempt to guess your username and password. So they're just throwing in random username and password. You can go and find and download a zip of the most popular WordPress username and passwords, and then like throw it into a script, and then I'll just keep trying those until it gets blocked. A DDoS attack, they don't even need to try to log in. They're just literally pinging the site. What they're using is a bot network, typically, and they're not even using your browser. They're just pinging their site using the command line, and so they're sending your site hundreds, if not thousands, of requests in a single second from multiple IPs using a bot network. And what it does is it crashes your site because your site runs out of resources. So there are two different kinds of attack. One is designed to break into your site. A DDoS attack is typically designed to take your site down. And people, and again, that's something else that you can just download a free script for, and has like a graphical user interface. You just type in the IP of the person you want to DDoS attack, and then these bots are on its way. The best way to mitigate against the DDoS attack is to purchase more hosting than you need. That's why these larger companies, why the DDoS attacks are less successful on them, is because they have the money and resources to invest into having so much resources it can handle the normal amount of traffic on their site, plus the increase of the bot network pinging all those requests, which then allows people to still access the site. They'll probably experience a little bit of a slowdown, but there'll be enough extra resources there to handle the load.
Definitely. Question in the chat was about a good security cleaning specialist, and Michael did just recommend Securi, which is a good option. We shared that in the chat as well, but those of you listening on the replay, Securi is a good option to clean your website. That is the malware scanner that is built into iTheme Security as well. Another question from Melanie: what is the recommended max login attempts and login attempts by user, and should she change this when she's under a brute force attack?
No, I honestly, if you're under a brute force attack, there's one thing I would do if I were you. If you haven't done already, I'd go into your one. I'm assuming. Let me preface this. I'm assuming that you already have strong passwords. I'm assuming you already have two-factor authentication in place. I'm assuming those are already done. So the only thing you want to do is, if you're under a brute force attack, is go to your notification center, go to your site lockout notification, disable that, make sure your daily digest is enabled, and that way you're not being bothered by it. Because here's the thing, like the defaults is going to be 5 for the IP and 10 for username. The reason why there's an extra allowance for the username is to hopefully help prevent, hopefully we're blocking out the IP before we're locking you, the user, out in case they're using your username on the brute force attack. But even if you do get locked out, You can use the magic link feature, which what the magic link feature does, it will send you a link to your email address, which will let you bypass the user lockout to allow you to get in and get your work done. So we can lock out the bad actor without locking you out. And the reason why you purchase iTheme Security is to automate your security. So there's really no actionable steps for you to take if you're under a brute force attack. There's no way to prevent these attacks. The idea is to prevent the attacks from being successful. And if you're getting notified about them, that's just iTheme Security not being humble and wanting a pat on the back for doing its job. And so the only thing, if you have strong passwords in place and everything else that we talked about here to lock down your site, and you have iTheme Security automatically limiting login attempts, there's nothing for you to do. Go do what you enjoy doing and do what you do. You don't make money by looking at your security logs. There's other more productive things you can do.
Excellent. Question from the chat. Michael, have you ever heard of Web Inspector's one-time free website malware removal?
I think I have, but honestly, I have no experience with them, nor have I known anyone to use those services. So, but I do feel like I've run across that before.
All right. We try not to share those sorts of URLs in the chat, please. Gene, how effective is hiding the back end for preventing brute force attacks?
Nowadays, it's just like there's all these old things that used to kind of work in WordPress, but really aren't that effective anymore. That's one of them. If you look up iThemes Michael Moore and go to my authors page, you'll see I wrote an article called 5 Security Myths Debunked. And the very first one I put in there is hide backend. And the reason why I put it number 1 is because it gives people a false sense of security, because there's multiple other ways to log in now. And one, it causes a ton of conflicts. So it's honestly more trouble than it's actually worth. It is with people being able to log in from, send login requests from the terminal, with people being able to log in through the REST API, with fingerprinting and everything else, hiding the WordPress version, which now you can find that through fingerprinting anyways, changing the WP content directly. Those are all old security through obscurity methods that the bots have become too sophisticated for. We moved to the advanced page of the security settings because it can conflict in so many different environments, and it is I only enable in testing. I don't enable on in my personal site because I personally think it's more trouble than it's actually worth.
All right, good information. Let's see. Ben would like to know if there is a place where he can find all of the defines for iTheme Security. Thanks to put in the IP config, the WP config.
The help center is going to have quite a bit of them. If you go to the FAQ section, so I'll have the disable two-factor, disable all, define. There's really not that many of them, and I think those are. I might be forgetting one right now, but I think those are the only 2, and I believe both of those are in the FAQ part of the help center.
All right, and I just again drop that link for the iThemes Help Center there in the chat. A lot of really good articles there on iTheme Security, as well as all the other iThemes products. That's been a real focus for the support team over the last year, is really bulking up that help center. So if you've not seen that recently, head over there and check a look, because there's a lot of great information, videos, and other how-tos. I believe that is all the questions. If I've missed your question, I apologize. Drop it again in the chat, and we will get that over to Michael. Michael, really good information today. Again, folks, if you're watching, the special today is 35% off of all iTheme Security Pro plans through the end of the month. Coupon code ITSEC35. That's 35% off of all the iTheme Security Pro plugin suite toolkit plans. Everything through April the 30th. That goes away at 11:59 p.m. Central Time on April the 30th. So if you do not yet have licenses for iThemes products, this is a great way to jump into our ecosystem and get security set up for your WordPress website. Melanie is asking about capturing the chat. Melanie, no, we do not save the chat for free webinars like this. We do for paid events, but not the free ones. So if there's some of the links that you want, scroll up and grab those. Also, download the slides. Let me drop that link in again as well. Download today's slides, and there's the page right there on Michael's slides where all of those links exist. If you came in late, I know a couple of you did, and you want to drop back and watch this on replay, or if there's any part of this, especially some of the settings that you want to go back and rewatch, we'll have the replay up in about an hour after we wrap up here in a few minutes. So just watch that link that is there in the chat now, and you'll be able to replay this webinar. Feel free to share that out as well. The more, the merrier. So I think that's all the questions, Michael. Hey, thanks for a great day of information all about securing our WordPress website. Any last thoughts as we're finishing up today?
Oh, no, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time and showing up today. And, again, we are really working on the Help Center. I have a whole list of documentation that I want to make it easier for your average user to take advantage of the different iTheme security feature and understand how they're protecting what they're doing to protect their site. And don't forget to check out that iThemes YouTube channel and subscribe there, because we are really trying to hit it hard. Released a couple new videos already this week, and we're going to have another one coming out later this week. But thank you guys very much for giving me your time.
Excellent. So thanks again, Michael. Yeah, and if you have a question about iTheme security, drop a support ticket in, and Michael likely will be one of the ones working on that with you. So he's a great guy to work with, and he'll do his best to help solve the issues that you are facing with getting iTheme security set up, or any other security-related question you have about WordPress. Just drop the support ticket in, and Michael will be happy to help you out. So again, thanks, Michael, for being with us today, and thank you all for being with us as well. Hopefully it was a good investment of your time. You've gotten some good insight and questions answered for yourself as far as securing your WordPress website. Again, my name is Nathan Ingram, and from all of us here at iThemes, we hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time here on iThemes Training, where we go far together. We'll see you next time.